I just want to walk you guys through some influential horror games that made the genre what it is today. And then if we have time, I'm just going to mention a few more obscure games that you may have played that are from, you know, more recent times and older as well, that I really enjoyed for you. And you can check them out, you know, to get spooky for Halloween. So let's do it. All right, so early horror games. So there are a lot of horror games that can be considered, or a lot of games rather, that can be considered horror, but I want to focus solely on ones that actually really try to scare players. So obviously, you know, with graphics, graphical improvements and stuff like that, time has shifted what we deem actually scary. But at the time of the release of these games I'm going to speak about, I think these ones got under people's skin in ways that film and other mediums maybe have a harder time doing, just because they don't have that sense of interactivity and immersiveness that games can provide. You know, like you steering the action, and when you're watching a film, things just kind of come at you and you're at the mercy of that. But when you're playing, you can kind of guide what you're doing, and I think it elevates the experience, makes it all the more scary. So these are a few. I'm not going to speak really about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Halloween, but those are just early examples of movie franchise tie-ins, and those were on Atari. But I'll speak about the one on the far left here, 3D Monster Maze. So this was released for the Sinclair ZX81. It isn't technically an all-out horror game. I'm just going to let this video run while I talk about it a bit, if it'll work. But it featured a monster that pursued the player relentlessly, and I think for that reason it earns a place in horror gaming history. So this was actually quite effective without even having audio. There was no audio in this game, just text readouts letting you know when the T-Rex was, you know, had spotted you and was in pursuit, which is cool because you think of like Nemesis from Resident Evil, stuff like that. This was like one of the first examples of that. I'll see if I can get in a point of the video to where we're being pursued. So it's pretty simple, as you can see. So you're basically, you know, it's like dungeon crawling gameplay, first person. So you see at the bottom there, footsteps approaching, kind of lets you know where the T-Rex is moving around to. It's pretty silly, like a T-Rex chasing you in a maze. What's that about? But yeah, there wasn't really a lot like this at the time of release. We'll see if, yeah, footsteps approaching. I don't know if the T-Rex will show this gameplay video, but anybody play this game or hear this game before? No?
Does your score go up the longer you last?
Yeah, the more, I think the more distance you cover and the longer you survive, your score goes up. So yeah, it's kind of neat. Rex lies in wait, so I guess he's stationary, waiting to hear.
What roughly year would this be?
I don't know why I don't have it on here. I think this was early 80s. It might have been around 83, 82, or anywhere from like 82 to 86, I think. Rex has seen you. It's funny that he's just Rex too, like you give him a name like Jimmy or something like that, that'd be funny. Anyway, so that's 3D Monster Maze. I'm sure you can find it archived somewhere online if you ever want to check it out. Yeah, it's kind of neat. And then we have Haunted House for the Atari 2600. So yeah, I had yours here. I don't know, maybe they'll pop up in the other slides. Maybe it doesn't like the font. But again, so it's not very scary to look at, as you'll see in this gameplay video. I think we have some audio as well. Basically, same kind of idea. You're a set of eyeballs moving around, I assume there's a body attached to it, but maybe it's just eyeballs, makes it freakier. But yeah, and then things chase you. So I feel like if you were playing this today, you would not be scared. It might just be intense, but at the time, again, you got to think, Atari games. This is pretty, horrific. Plus that cover art's really rad.
Yeah.
Like, it's really cool. There you go.
You're trying to find a way out.
Yeah, I think you're trying to exit the maze.
I still have this one.
Do you have it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. You played it. Kids today don't know what they have with these modern games. They have to listen to the same sound effect over and over and over and over. Yeah. But this one I think is unique as well, because unlike 3D Monster Maze where it's just a T-Rex chasing you, this one has actual, it's actually themed horror, which is cool. That makes it noteworthy, I think. So, yeah, you got spiders, ghosts, all kind of creepy crawly things chasing you. So that's Haunted House. Oh, there are my ears. Good. Okay. So yeah, this is the Screamer. This was a PC Engine title. Essentially, it's a post-apocalyptic, cyberpunk, biological horror action game. That's a mouthful. It's set after World War III that occurs. I'll get some gameplay going here. It switches between first-person dungeon crawling and side-scrolling shooter combat, I guess you could call it. And didn't really have a North American release, it was only in Japan, but I think as of 2015, there's a fan translation out there, so I think that's what this video is of. But it's got really neat art, it's got a really cool aesthetic to it, it's kind of like a Mad Max,
This is awesome.
cyberpunk type thing. Yeah, it's really neat. We'll see if it gets a little more into the gameplay here. I'm gonna have to go forward. So yeah, a lot of like text-based stuff, as you can imagine from a PC Engine game from this time. But yeah, very, very colorful. And if it gets into some of the action, it's pretty gnarly as well. Yeah. So there's some of the dungeon crawling there. Kind of like if you've ever played Shin Megami Tensei type stuff. And there's some of the side-scrolling stuff. Which is cool, because I don't know how many games there are where it alternates between this first-person kind of thing, and then it's not just like an RPG battle screen, it's actual side-scrolling combat, which is neat. But still with that RPG element, because you got all your HP stats there and everything like that. And again, I'm sure you can find this archive somewhere online for free, like a lot of these old games. And there's a game I'm going to speak about a little later that just got put online for free that you can play in browser, which is really cool. But yeah, like look at this art, like it's really awesome, really unique. Okay, so another kind of similar game. It's also a PC Engine title. So this is what a lot of folks consider to be the first actual survival horror video game. The next one I'm going to speak about is maybe a little more notable than this one. More people have heard of it, but yeah. In this game, you play as Leigh. She's a SWAT officer who has to deal with a demon-infested town named Cheney's Hill. And it's cool because it features open world elements and RPG elements, which is neat for being the first survival horror basically. Let's see if we can get into some gameplay here.
I don't know what's going on here. Oh, hi. Sorry.
Hello, I'm just doing are you looking for somebody?
No, we're just looking around.
Cool.
We're just waiting for the wall.
Right on.
So can I ask what is going on up here?
I'm not sure, no. We're just talking about early horror video games and the impact they had, yeah.
Alright, sorry about that.
No worries.
I'm gonna close the door.
Cheers, man.
Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, you kind of got your Earthbound or Pokemon-esque, early RPG vibe going on here. But like I said, it's open world. You can go wherever you want and talk to people, which is pretty cool. And it switches to a side-scrolling kind of thing once you get into combat with things. So let's see if I can find some gameplay of that. There we go. It's kind of like a Zelda vibe. There we go. And again, it's got the RPG, like select what you're going to do, but also you're free to move around and actually, duck or jump or whatever over bullets and stuff. Some demon soldiers. Who knows what those are? Yeah. So yeah, this was 1987, so pretty trailblazing at the time. Has anybody heard of either of these last two games?
No.
Yeah, so I feel like it's not so well known over here. Probably that never really got official translations or anything. So yeah, you can do melee combat, you have weapons. She's dressed a little oddly for being a SWAT officer, but it was the 80s.
Whoa.
And there's some of those headless demon intestine things coming out of there. Yeah, it's got rad music too. Yeah, so that's War of the Dead. Go on to the next one here. Okay, so I have a lot to say about this one. This one's one of my personal favorite games of all time. So Sweet Home, it was released for the Famicom. Never, like a lot of these, never got an official release over here, but there is a fan translation you can find. So really, I hate to say this about any kind of creative work, but just go out and download a ROM of this game because it's the only way you can really play it. I know they've made cartridges that you can actually play in your Nintendo, but it's the same as if you just went out and downloaded it. So if you ever want to check it out, I think you can find it to play in browser as well. Let me show you some gameplay here. So Resident Evil, everyone knows Resident Evil if you're into horror games. That's a series that gets a lot of love. But I think if it wasn't for Sweet Home, which is an adaptation of a J-horror film of the same name, I don't think players would have ever even stepped foot in Raccoon City. So this was directed by Takuro Fujiwara, who worked on Ghosts and Goblins, and he actually was a producer on the first Resident Evil. So this game puts you in control of 5 filmmakers as you explore a foreboding mansion. Each character has a special set of skills and tools. So they have kind of like a thing they can do, and then like 1 or 2 items they can use that the other ones can't. So some of these are like, being able to set ropes on fire with a lighter, vacuum up debris that might be blocking the way forward for the rest of the characters. So you can only control 1 character at a time, and then you select through this menu what other character you want to control. So you just move individually. So you can have your players scattered about the mansion doing different things at one time, which is pretty neat. And even Resident Evil eventually, I think it was Resident Evil 0 for GameCube, let you kind of do this sort of thing as well, swapping between the male and female characters anytime you want. So this game has a pretty simplistic art style, due to the limitations of the Nintendo, but once you get into battles with demons and other spooky things that are around, it switches to a more detailed art style. and actually had really gory depictions of violence and stuff, which is pretty cool, because hands down, I believe it's the goriest Nintendo game ever made. So if one of the adventurers meets their demise, for instance, like you'll watch them get slashed in half or slumped down in a bloody mess against the wall, stuff like that. I'll see if I can find some of that gameplay here. Let's see if I can find... What's the... Yeah, so this is the battle screen. A wisp, I don't know. Let's see if I can find like a zombie. Also really great music. A lot of these wisp things early game. So yeah, the one character is using a mallet to destroy the rocks so they can all go through. And yeah, you have a paramedic character that can heal the party. So for instance, if that character's off in another room and you're dying, you know, you got to take that character and run all the way back and remember where you are and stuff like that. So it's pretty intense for what it is. But yeah, I'm like I said, massive fan of this game. It's great. If you enjoy this kind of thing, definitely check it out. Anybody here Sweet Home prior to this? Or no? It's incredible. Yeah. So that is Sweet Home. One of the best horror games ever made. And very influential. Now, I assume you guys have heard of Splatterhouse, yeah. So with Sweet Home, I think this is one of the earliest examples of like, you know, no holds barred depictions of gore in gaming. The TurboGrafx 16, it was originally an arcade release, but the TurboGrafx 16 version had to display a warning on the cover because it actually predated the Entertainment Software Rating Board system. So I forget what it said on the actual cover, but it was like, you know, adults, don't let your kids play this game. And yeah, this one has, you know, obvious slasher film influences. I mean, with a hockey mask, like, yeah, clearly Jason. It's also heavily influenced by Lovecraft with the monster design and stuff, which is cool. And this, you know, you can, if you want to check it out, it's kind of like a mixture of like Friday the 13th and Namco beat 'em ups, which is right up my alley. But yeah, if you want to check this out, they did a reboot of this game for the PS3 and Xbox 360, and it actually had the first 3 games included as part of that. I would not recommend the reboot game; it's quite terrible, sadly, but good, worth picking up if you can find it cheap just to play these 3 games, because they're gems. Great sound effects. Sounds like hitting a baseball bat for some reason, chopping with a cleaver. Who knows why? And it's hard as heck, like, it's a tough game. Obviously, because it was designed for, you know, arcade cabinet, just to eat quarters and such, but yeah, I think if you own a Switch as well, the Namco Museum, you can get the Namco Museum get released, and it has Splatterhouse in it. And it's the actual arcade port, not the TurboGrafx 16 version, which had a few different sound effects and was maybe a little bit less gory, which is no good. We don't want that. I love the way they did the stick splat against the wall. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, this game's cheap. Like, it's too hard. Like, some of the stuff, like, you don't stand a chance. You gotta just, but like a lot of side scrollers, like Mega Man and stuff of the time, you just have to memorize what's going on, as this guy clearly knows from watching his gameplay, his or her gameplay rather. Yeah. And it just gets progressively more gruesome as you keep going on. And the final boss is like this weird, grotesque, melting face with a hand that comes up and tries to grab you and stuff. So yeah, I think everyone said they know this game, but if you haven't played it, check it out. It's really good. And this one's not scary, but I don't think a lot of people know about this game, so I just wanted to mention it. So this is a chibi version or remake of Splatterhouse that was released for the Famicom in Japan. It's called Wenpaku Graffiti, and as you can see, it's got pop culture references. That little vampire there does like the Thriller dance. It's not a good year to talk about Michael Jackson, I realize, but yeah, it's funny. It's really cute. And it's the same kind of gameplay. It's like side-scrolling, things coming at you, you got your machete. And look at that art, the cover, it's incredible. Rick doing the peace sign. I got these wacky ghouls, I gotta fight with peace, man. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. So check that out. Again, I don't think there's a English version, but you can find a fan translation somewhere out there. Okay, so this was the game I was talking about that's actually free to play in browser now. So if you've never played Alone in the Dark, highly, highly recommend it. Along with Sweet Home, it's basically created the survival horror genre. Let me get some gameplay here. So a lot of survival horror, especially like Resident Evil, stuff like that, it's fairly linear. The game is kind of guiding you which way you gotta go. You don't really have very many options of paths you can take, because just the nature of it, you have to unlock things and solve puzzles to get through. This game didn't have that. It was non-linear, and you're free to explore the mansion and do in whatever order you want. So there's obvious, as you can see from the cover, there's some Lovecraft influence as well. It says right there. And this game was actually super rad in the sense that you could choose a male or female protagonist right from the gate. So that's cool, because if you're a lady playing, you don't always want to be men in the games, and vice versa. Well, not vice versa, because all the characters were male a lot of the times. But yeah, so I think that's noteworthy. It's pretty cool. I mean, Resident Evil did the same kind of thing with Chris and Jill. I was forgetting. But yeah, Google it. You can find it in browser to play if you've never played it. Have you all played this one?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
It's pretty great. Like the graphics are, again, like it's not that scary, but it's got some really good jump scares in this game. And for the time, this was pretty incredible graphically. And yeah, this was out on PC when it came out. And I don't think it got ported anywhere else. I think it's only PC. And then obviously they made other Alone in the Dark games, which, they're okay, they're enjoyable, but they're not as good as this. I think it's going through like a slideshow of images. I don't know. But like that right there with the rotating items like that and 3D, like that's totally like Resident Evil. Pretty atmospheric. And with the camera, like, yeah, you can see the influence it had on like Resident Evil and such with the fixed camera angles and the movements, tank control type stuff. Ooh, creaky door. Did you play this back when it was like kind of fresh, or?
It was probably like 13.
Yeah.
12 or 13.
Did it scare you?
Yeah, it was creepy.
It's tense. And I think the nature of just like being you're open to explore makes it cool, because you go back and play it, if you don't remember certain rooms of certain monsters or whatever in it, can surprise you again, which is cool. But the graphics are a little funny, like the characters look a little.
I remember the idea of like not being guided where to go was made it really creepy.
Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah. You feel better. This guy's my fashion inspiration with his mustache. That's who I aspire to be. See if he. I'll just wait a little bit, see if he finds the monster fight. Oh! What's that? There's a monster. Zombie. Pretty good sound effects. Whoosh. Throw soup. Whoosh. Yeah, that's Alone in the Dark. As I said, you can find it and play it in your browser, so if you're bored at work and nobody's watching, you got access to a computer, do it up. Okay, let's move on. So this one, I mean, everybody knows Doom. I just felt like I had to mention it. It's not particularly scary to play anymore. It's just kind of intense, but I remember, you know, being a kid playing it, it freaked me out. Especially the lighting, how there'd be, as things were in the distance, you couldn't really see. And, you know, George Romero's like level design, just labyrinthian kind of just craziness, doors, secrets everywhere. It's neat. So id's earlier title, Wolfenstein 3D, explored similar territory first. It's pretty much the same game almost in terms of like gameplay. But this, yeah, had obviously a more horrific atmosphere, you know, demons, lots of gore. But this was obviously a pioneering game for the first-person genre along with Wolfenstein 3D. And at the time it was released, as with Wolfenstein, it's hard to believe now maybe, but this was like immersive, fluid graphics that ran at a speed that on PC games, even with like Alone in the Dark you saw there, it's pretty slow paced, and this game you can just fly, which is a little more common I feel around the early 90s on consoles, like side-scrolling Mario and stuff like that, but the speed at which it ran was pretty noteworthy for the time. And it also had video game industry milestones, you know, being one of the first shareware games where you download early few levels of the game, and then if you liked it, you paid, and you could get access to the rest. So kind of like an early concept of the demo. And, you know, it also created the term deathmatch, which not really, I mean, first-person games still reference that, I guess, but also like local area network games, LAN matches, and Doom as well was really notable for like modding. Had a huge mod community, still to this day has a huge mod community. One, I was going to put a little video up, but I didn't end up putting it in, was somebody replaced everything in the game with Tim Allen's face from Home Improvement, and every sound effect is the so the monster's screaming in pain, the gun firing, footsteps, everything is that sound effect. So it's a nightmare. It's almost scarier than Doom. Yeah, you can find video of that on YouTube if you wish. I wouldn't recommend looking up unless you want nightmares, but yeah. So that's Doom. Alright, so now we got Phantasmagoria. So this was created by Roberta Williams. She is notable for being the King's Quest creator, which if you played a lot of PC games back in the day, you probably know King's Quest. So she intended it to be a horror anthology with several sequels that would explore, you know, different themes. Now, unfortunately, only 2 were made. There was this one, and then the sequel, Puzzle of Flesh, which I think came out a year or 2 later. But this game basically tells the story of a writer, Adrienne, who purchases a mansion as inspiration for her next novel. Of course, unbeknownst to her, the ghost of the mansion's former owner, it's pretty ridiculous, a magician named Zoltan, who summoned a spirit with black magic that possessed him and caused him to murder his wives, plural wives. So, yeah, that's the premise of this game. It had a big budget for the time. I think it was like, maybe I'm incorrect, but it's like $75 million or something back in 1995 for a video game. Pretty insane. Yeah, it's got full motion video, and it kind of combines that with point and click adventure gameplay, which I'll fast forward through the video a bit. And this was one of Sierra's best-selling titles, I believe, I found in my research. So yeah, you got the full motion video of Adrian there walking around with static backgrounds and point and click adventure style gameplay. And this was actually a very controversial game when it came out because it has very graphic depictions of violence and also sexual stuff as well. So yeah, pretty neat. I'm a sucker for full motion FMV games. Like, I just find them to be like nothing else. There's an odd charm to it, and watching the act. Like, there's what's that game, Night Trap? Yeah, if you've never heard of Night Trap, check that out too, because it's hilarious. But this game's pretty weird and like demented. Has anybody played this one, Phantasmagoria? I think it's on Good Old Games. Sorry?
I'm familiar with it, but I've never played it.
Yeah, I think that they put the sequel and this game on Good Old Games, if I'm not mistaken. Definitely, and I think these games are like fun to play with someone else who can notice stuff. Like, it's not like, Doom or something where you're just running around and the person might get bored watching just the same thing, but if you put your minds together, yeah. Let's see if I can find some other. But basically it's just this, like walking around. A lot of the violence and stuff takes place between the characters and stuff like that, so.
Sure was. Carter was in his prime in the 1880s and 90s. He traveled all over the world.
Good
with
acting.
an extravagant magic show. Oh, we probably wouldn't be very impressed by it today.
Yeah, it's got kind of a ridiculous premise, but it's very effective for.
Bit on the darker side.
So yeah, check that game out if you can. Okay, and that brings us to Clock Tower. So this was a Super Nintendo game. They released a PS1 game that was just called Clock Tower. That's actually its sequel, but if you didn't play this one, you'd think it was the first. And I don't think this got a release over in North America, but again, with like a lot of these games, there was fan translations, which you can find. So this is a point and click game, which is kind of cool because it's on Super Nintendo, not a lot of those. And it was inspired by Dario Argento's Phenomena, aka Creepers in North America. Essentially, it tells the story of Jennifer Simpson and her friends Laura, Ann, and Lot, who are adopted. Their children adopted by a man named Mr. Barrows, who has them live in his mansion. And you're hunted by this mysterious character called the Scissor Man, who chases you with giant scissors. And he's pretty iconic horror game villain, up there with like Pyramid Head, I would say, and Nemesis, stuff like that. So let me see if I can find some gameplay. So this game also had 9 different endings, which is cool, depending on what the player did. So, and they all range from good to bad. And one of them's actually a secret ending. And it spawns sequels. I think there's 3 or 4 of these games. Yeah, I can't really think of a point and click adventure game on the Super Nintendo, really. Like, it's kind of a interesting console to do it on. Let's see if I can find some Scissor Man gameplay. But yeah, same kind of thing, like you don't know when he's gonna pop out and chase you. So a lot of periods of like very slow, just exploration, picking up items to solve puzzles, that kind of a thing. see if I can find some more. Where are you at, Scissor Man?
Thank you.
Yeah, really atmospheric, really cool. I don't know if I can find the scissor. Has anybody played Clock Tower?
One version of this. I can't remember the name of this game.
Yeah.
But I played some version of this, and it didn't look quite like.
It might have been the PS1
But it was
version.
scary.
Yeah, it's effective.
Cover art's great.
Yeah, the cover art's beautiful. It's a shame it didn't get an English release this game, but yeah, like I said, you can find it online. I'm sure if Fan has translated it. Yeah, so that's Clock Tower. I'm bummed I can't find the Scissor Man, but let's try one more time. Is that the Scissor Man?
Looks like it.
There he is. Yeah, so he's a creep and he follows you around. Yeah, great music in this game and sound effects. He'll be back. Yeah, so check that out, or the sequels. I think the PS1 version might be, the sequel might be on PlayStation Network. Not sure. Yeah, it's Clock Tower. All right, D. Anybody heard of D before? Okay, so this is PS1 game. It's developed by Kenji Ino. He's a mysterious, very mysterious and controversial game developer in Japan. Sadly, he's not with us anymore. I think he died in 2013. His last game, I think, was a sequel to this game for the Dreamcast, D2. Also recommend checking that out. But yeah, this is the story of this game is Laura Harris, the main character. Her father goes on a murder spree and takes a entire hospital hostage. And you essentially have 2 hours to figure out why and put an end to it. And you uncover things about Laura's dark family history that I won't spoil. So this game, I think, is notable because it pushed the boundaries of first-person survival horror, and it's got FMV elements, kind of like Phantasmagoria, and also it deals with really taboo subject matters like cannibalism and super intense graphic violence and stuff. Let's see if I can find gameplay. So yeah, like a lot of these survival horror games, exploring, solving puzzles, collecting items so that you can unlock your way forward kind of thing. Hey, welcome guys, by the way, who just came in. What's up? So yeah, it's got that FMV look to it, but it's not real actors like Phantasmagoria. It's still stylized, which is, it's got a real cool look to it. And I think just the fact that it's first person like this is really cool because you get a bit of that perspective in like the old Resident Evil games when you're opening a door type thing, but this is an entire game of that. So when the scares come, they're pretty effective. I never played the sequel on Dreamcast, but I imagine it looks quite a bit better. Yeah, very slow burn, very atmospheric. Definitely recommend checking it out if you've never played it. Yeah, very slow. A lot of this. Yeah, we'll move on. All right, so Resident Evil. So this was a lot of folks' maybe first survival horror experience. It's definitely the title that's most associated with the genre. It had tank controls, kind of like Alone in the Dark, as a method of creating tension, I feel, because it didn't give you a full view of what you were getting yourself into. Characters kind of, the zombies come from the edges of the screen, stuff like that. So yeah, there'd be blind spots. Oh god, it's got no, the worst voice acting in video game history, which is funny. But it's still one of the best horror games, I feel. Have you all played the original Resident Evil?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, or the remake for GameCube is really, really good as well.
Thank you, Barry.
It's terrible voice acting. But yeah, that GameCube remake really captures. It's the same kind of thing. It's still got the fixed camera angles and everything. It just, makes it a little less rough around the edges with the voice acting and stuff.
It's so difficult.
It's hard as hell, yeah. And the puzzles are just obtuse and bizarre. Like, they make no sense. Like, why am I using I can't even think of it, like statues and weird shit. Did anybody play that remake of Resident Evil 2 that came out?
Yeah.
That was amazing. But that kind of took the more modern Resident Evil over the shoulder, kind of, you're able to like move around pretty well.
I was surprised at how good it was.
Yeah.
As a game and like as a remake.
Yeah, I mean, it was my favorite horror game of the year, easily. Yeah, so that's Resident Evil. This game also uses off-camera sound effects really well, I think, which is something that's since kind of become integral in horror games. It's also cool that it doesn't give the player a health meter. Really, you have to go into the menu to check that out, so it's not on-screen UI. Which is cool because it's all about taking a little bit of control away from the player to heighten the tension, I feel. And Resident Evil set the stage, I feel, for Silent Hill, Dead Space, Evil Within, that type of stuff. Interesting tidbit though, this game actually started as development as a remake of Sweet Home. So it was originally going to be a remake. But I also think this game's super cinematic for the time it came out, and they're still, like Resident Evil games are still, even though they're more action oriented now, are super cinematic, which is a very important feature, I feel, of survival horror games post, Resident Evil 1. Oh, those fucking crows. The crows and the dogs in this game. Busting through the window. Yeah, so that's Resident Evil. And I know I'm getting close to 1 o'clock, so let's move on ahead. Okay, so Silent Hill. So if, I feel like I read this somewhere and it hit the nail right on the head, but if, Resident Evil is like George A. Romero inspired, Silent Hill is more like David Lynch, I feel. It's more like psychological horror, uses atmosphere to get under your skin, not a lot of jump scares. Silent Hill tells the story of the first one, at least, is Harry Mason, who explores, the mysterious titular town of Silent Hill for his missing daughter. Drew inspiration from Resident Evil, but like I said, much more of a slow burn, less action-oriented story. And it really, the entire series is great, particularly the first 2 games, but definitely one of the best series for psychological horror in all of gaming. And there's references into Stephen King, Trauma films, Mary Shelley, all sorts of stuff in here. I'll just fast forward to some gameplay. But yeah, similar kind of thing, fixed camera angle, tank controls. This game didn't have a high emphasis on like being able to fight very well. You're kind of useless. You have like crowbars and a pistol, but like you got to run away a lot of the time, which is cool because it just adds tension to the game. And sadly, I don't think we're going to talk about the more obscure other games, but we'll finish off with a really good game here, one of my favorites of all time, System Shock 2. The reason I picked System Shock 2 is just because I feel like it did everything the first game did, but just elevated it to be so much more effective. Has anybody played System Shock 2? Heard of System Shock 2 though? Yeah. So it's set in the early 22nd century. It tells the story of a soldier aboard the UNN Rickenbacker vessel, who the ship's purpose was aiding humanity's first faster-than-light starship, which was called the Von Braun. So essentially at the beginning of the game, as the player, you awake from cryogenic stasis to a derelict ship that's overrun by hostile mutants. Good time. So this game combined, first-person shooter elements with RPG stuff in a way that really hadn't been done before and not a lot does since. Although it was the forefather essentially of the immersive sim, so games like BioShock, Deus Ex, that kind of thing. Ken Levine was on the team that developed this game, and he's the creator of BioShock. So, like I said, I think it built and improved on the original, which is why I'm not talking about the original. The original is cool if you haven't played it, but this is just a much more polished game and a lot scarier, I feel. Lots of emails, audio logs, so environmental narrative for the player to sift through and stuff. So telling a story, not just with what's unfolding on the screen, which is also pretty cool. And it's a great early example of like sci-fi horror, which is one of my favorite things. And currently they're developing a sequel. I don't know when it's going to be released, they just say soon, but yeah, hopefully it's going to be good. But yeah, this game's creepy as shit. Especially for the time. You might be able to mod it to make it look a little better, so it'd be more effective, but yeah, it's even vanilla, if you play it, it's pretty effective at getting under your skin. Yeah, so that's System Shock 2. I think that brings us to the end of our time, so won't be able to talk about the other obscure titles, but if you're curious, you can find me on the floor. I'll be at the Rue Morgue booth. Thank you.
Cool.
Very much, guys.